Welcome to the Action is the Antidote podcast. The purpose of this show is to turn you on to more people who take massive action to end human trafficking. Because massive action is what it takes to end human trafficking as fast as possible. We want you to feel empowered, never overwhelmed. The truth is messy, and it takes something truly special to stick your neck out and fight for what's right. The Red Corps needs more special action takers like our friend Melissa Eick from the Dragonfly Home. Here's our conversation about the life-changing work that the Dragonfly Home does every single day.
First thing I want to know is how did the backpack drive go? I know we were up there with you guys, and what was the reaction? How was it received?
Oh, I mean, actually, all the backpacks are still in that room because I think you saw that we were like in the midst of moving. So we're still in the midst of that. And we actually just gave a tour to someone today, and we were telling them about it and how it's grown over the years and just how useful it is to the people who we serve when they don't have anything, the courage that it takes to leave their situation, knowing that they leave everything behind. They don't get to take anything with them. And just to be able to provide some level of comfort to them when that happens, or if we have to do an emergency relocation and now they're hundreds of miles from what's familiar, we can give that to them. So I don't know if that's the reaction you're looking for. Everyone at Dragonfly is astounded and just super thankful. And then it's fun to tell that story about you guys to our supporters.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you get people coming into the Dragonfly Home, usually where are they coming from? Where do most rescue victims come from?
Do you mean what part of the country, or okay, geographical area? Let's see. I can't speak to specific percentages. I think most of the people who we've served, they've all been trafficked within Oklahoma, most people. A lot of them were born and raised and trafficked in Oklahoma. Some people might have grown up somewhere else in the US and then ended up being trafficked here. We have helped some people who are from other countries as well. But yeah, most people, the majority over the past few years, have been from somewhere in Oklahoma. A lot of them right from Oklahoma City metropolitan.
Yeah. So how did you get the name Dragonfly Home?
Yeah, when we first, when we were just in the works of founding the organization, we were what could we possibly say? Because we really wanted the name to reflect the people who we serve. So we just basically Googled symbols. We brainstormed some attributes of people who we serve. And we were strength and resilience, courage. And we were plop that into Google. And we were what symbolizes those things? And Dragonfly kept coming up over and over again. And there are a couple of cool things from that. First, we learned that the dragonfly has symbolized those things in cultures from all over the world for generations. So we liked that because there's no one demographic of human trafficking. Every age, every socioeconomic status, every nationality, it doesn't discriminate. And so we thought it was cool how the dragonfly represented that. And so, but then in addition to representing these attributes that our clients already...
People coming out of being trafficked, it's a long road to recovery, and it can be really difficult. How do you figure out what you want from your life after, coming from a situation like this?
Yeah, that's very true. So a lot of the people we serve, because it's in addition to just the psychological and physical trauma of it, so many people, in order to sell someone, they've been devalued, stripped of their humanity, treated as a product and not a human being. And one way that traffickers gain that control is by having absolute control. So over what someone eats, whether or not they eat, whether or not they sleep, their hair, their clothes, everything they do, exerting control in every moment. And so since starting all of this, even before Dragonfly, it's like very common to hear that they're like, well, I don't really know, like, what do you want to do with your life? And they're like, well, I haven't been allowed to state an opinion or what I need for however long. So yeah, it's really hard to just suddenly know that. And so, over the years, people have said, I don't know what my favorite color is. I don't know what I want to do with my life. Also, another factor is if someone wasn't able to finish school or really participate in school. Like, I figured out a lot of that stuff in middle school and high school. If someone's being trafficked, they don't get that opportunity. And so a lot of what we do at Dragonfly goes beyond providing for physical necessities, or we do that and like the medical care and counseling and that kind of thing. That's all part of it. But then just like woven into how we are with the people who come to us, and things like they walk in to our crisis center, right? And the first thing they can do is choose, you want some chips? Do you want a granola bar? Here are a few different sodas, grab what you want. So like from moment one, it's like these little types of empowerment. You would have seen this on our tour. We have multiple therapy rooms, different kinds of chairs or couches. And so somebody can choose what room they want to sit in, what chair they want to sit in. We have a bunch of like stress relieving items. So like stress balls, Play-Doh, coloring books, little like toys that I don't even know the name of. They're squishy or something, and I don't know what they're called, but they're fun to play with. Or like, what was those things, the fidget spinners that were so big a few years ago? And so someone can choose which one of those things works for them. I just heard a story about someone we served who had a hard time maybe telling her story, as a lot of people would, but she found one of these little stress toys that I don't have the name for, and whatever it was about that, its squishiness, she could play with that like the whole time, and that it was like a focus for her. And anyway, it's a really long answer because there's so much that goes into it, but yeah. So just that moment one of healing when they come to Dragonfly, we're trying to empower them to make those decisions. And then if you'll permit me to speak for even longer, one more thing. We also have we've begun introducing in the last year a lot of group activities, and they'll have like themes to them. So one group activity is like discover your passion. And so we brought in different speakers who have different passions. One is a girl who is going out for the Olympic boxing team. She's awesome. One is a professional baker who started her own business in Oklahoma City. Another is this amazing spoken word poet. And they just shared about their passions. And one person who was attending was like, I have never even thought about what I want my passion to be, but now like seeing this, I realize that I can figure that out. And that's such a huge win to hear.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're talking about like a survivor's life when they get out and all of a sudden they have control over their schedule, their life. Mm-hmm. How do you help them manage that besides from like the passion, what do you ultimately want to do with your life? Mm-hmm. But how do you handle like the day to day? All of a sudden they probably feel like they have a lot of responsibilities that they didn't in new ways.
It's interesting. I feel like that's going to vary a lot, like the reaction from person to person. But that's why the concept of freedom is so huge. Like transitioning into that, is going to be difficult in a different way for everyone. So a big part of what we offer at Dragonfly is case management. And so, that allows us to tailor services depending on what each person needs. And so that might look like helping someone with that kind of thing, connecting them to other service providers that they might need, helping them secure safe housing, and then maybe providing transportation, scheduling, liaising to set up different appointments that they might need. So it's just all that's kind of woven in.
Yeah. Do you have connections or like a network to get them educated when they come through? Is that a big part of it?
Educated in what way? Like just school?
Yeah, just school.
Okay, so I know that we have worked with like tutors, but I will say that our direct care team just like has tons of resources, and they're constantly researching, finding either partnerships or resources for that kind of thing. I don't know the ins and outs of all of that. Their network of partnerships is so big. Like I don't even know all of them. But I do know that a number of people who we have served have taken the GED exam, have like started preparing for it, maybe taken it a few times, and they eventually pass it. And then, if that is a goal of theirs, if education is something that they're wanting to pursue, then we definitely have resources to work with them on that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so how long have the survivors that you get, how long have they been trafficked for?
Oh gosh. Most of the time? Yeah, I mean, there might be people who were trafficked for a couple weeks or maybe even over one weekend. And then we have people, I mean, from that one end of the spectrum to people who are in their 20s and someone started trafficking them when they were children. So it has been like literally their entire life up to that point, perhaps. Some people, maybe if someone begins selling them at some point in their teens, throughout their 20s, that could be like a few years. And we have helped people who are well into adulthood. I know at least someone that we helped was, I think, in her 70s or 80s, and had been trafficked for a really long time. So it's just, I mean, really, it's all over the place. Everybody's stories there are common themes in trafficking, but everyone's story can be really different.
Yeah, that's what I figured, is that it's all varying lengths. Mm-hmm. Yeah, one thing that Asha brought up to me, our Red Cord president, was, the term trafficking hasn't been around really that long.
Right.
And it's like an all-encompassing kind of term. Mm-hmm. And, spending time working with the Red Cord, I realized just how many people are affected by this.
Right.
And just in really different ways. Mm-hmm. So you have all sorts of different people coming through that you guys are helping out. And I know now you guys are trying to expand and get that shelter up and running. So
right.
How's that
going? Well, definitely the expanding has happened. So as you know, like we expanded the crisis center, moved into a new location a year ago, and expanded now beyond that. And then as far as adding the shelter is concerned, like it's progressive. We would love for everything to happen, overnight. And someone's like, here's a house, here's everything that you need. That'd be great. That has not so far been our story. So we are in the midst of fundraising. Our goal would be to raise about $300,000 to purchase a property. And then there's more on, maybe a couple hundred thousand more beyond that, just to get it up and running. Because purchasing a property is just the first step. And there's a lot that needs to be done, because as you know, in order to legally serve trafficking victims in Oklahoma, you have to be certified by the Attorney General and the Victim Services Unit. And that includes, like, they come out to the premises of every location and inspect it and go through it to make sure that it's up to the legally required standards. So there's a lot of steps after just getting a property. But anyway, as far as fundraising is concerned, we've raised a little over $100,000 since February. And on the one hand, we're like, oh man, we really thought we should have been done by now. But then you're like, we've raised over $100,000 in less than 6 months. Like, that's incredible. And and miraculous to us.
Yeah, celebrate the wins.
That's right.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah, just so we're like super clear, what's the difference between the crisis center that you have now and the shelter?
Mm-hmm.
And just explain for anyone who's not aware, like, what is the demand for the shelter?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so a couple things. So the crisis center, we started out with that, and that is non-residential. Because what we learned over the years, even prior to Dragonfly, working with human trafficking victims under another organization, was that shelter services are great, but like the licensing for shelter services, and in other parts of the country, shelter services are likely to only be available to women who are over the age of 18 and have been specifically sex trafficking victims. That's what the license for shelter is in Oklahoma. But I mean, just a cursory knowledge of human trafficking will help someone realize, like, wait, that leaves out a whole bunch of people. So men, there's no trafficking shelter for men, whether they're sex or labor trafficking victims. People who are labor trafficking victims, men and women, could be really hard for them to get services. They might find help somewhere, but when it comes to the kind of trauma that comes with like exploitation as a product, like it takes specialized help to deal with that. And then it also leaves out juveniles.
Yeah.
So with our non-residential center, we're able to help that whole spectrum of people, usually ages 15 and up. If we're helping juveniles, that's going to, go through proper governmental organizations, all the proper oversight. Most of the people we serve are above 18, men and women, sex and labor trafficking victims. What last I heard, this has been a while and we've helped a lot of people since, but maybe like as much as half of the people we serve don't qualify for shelter or don't need shelter, because some of them might have a safe place to live. Maybe they're staying with some safe family members. They might have a home of their own, but they need the specialized care to move on from trafficking. And then about half would need our shelter services. And that's been so hard because we're like, oh, if we had a shelter, we'd have a place for them to go right now. Instead, we're partners with the 2 state certified shelters in Tulsa, the Tulsa area. But there's just such a demand, like sometimes they're full. And so then it's finding somewhere else with all of our partnerships in Oklahoma and other parts of the country, to make sure that they get safe housing. So yeah, I think there's always people who could use a shelter here in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, there's definitely a need for a new shelter, and one that's right there in OKC.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about you personally a little bit. You had mentioned that I think you said you went to law school, right?
Yeah.
How do you go from law school to getting involved in human trafficking and then making that your full-time thing?
Well, I'll tell you how it happened, Brandon. So I'm a person of faith, and I was a community college French professor in Iowa a long time ago, and I thought I was going to go get my PhD in linguistics and become a language professor. And then I felt God so specifically call me to law school, which I thought was a terrible idea, and I didn't want to go. And also, like, Oklahoma was not on my radar. But I prayed about it for like a year and a half, and I was like, I can't fight it anymore is what I'm supposed to do. Did not know why. Found the University of Tulsa, and when I visited Tulsa, it was the only school that I visited because I remember exactly where I was standing, and I'm like, well, I know that this is where I'm supposed to go. And then my very first semester, like probably 6 to 8 weeks into my first semester at TU, I went to a meeting of the International Law Society, and they were showing a documentary, like an MTV documentary about human trafficking hosted by Angelina Jolie. And it was about sex trafficking in Eastern Europe. And man, I remember like sitting in that room and they turned the lights on after it was done. And I was just everybody else just kind of like got up and left. And I remember that moment, like, wow, like what did I just see? And then it was like, from that point on, I can look at these different points during law school when human trafficking came up. And I had thought, oh, I could never do anything with like domestic violence victims or criminal law because it's too hard. And I couldn't be involved with such a thing. I'm too soft, I guess. And then of course, like, this is what I'm doing. So that's laughable now. And I graduated from law school and I began practicing, but it was like, I just couldn't get away from human trafficking. Kind of like I couldn't get away from law school in my heart. Now, like with human trafficking, it was just always on my mind, always on my heart. And so I just started taking little steps toward getting involved. And one of the first things I did was do like some legal research. There's tons of like policy work that needs to be done, which has already kind of started to move into my world. And I'm like, oh, cool. I graduated from law school in 2011. It's 2019. I think I know why God had me go to law school, why he called me in 2005 to go. And then I'll say, like, just with nonprofit stuff and understanding new legislation, it comes in handy being a lawyer. But, one thing I have found is that like being a lawyer is all about communication skills, building a case. If you think about human trafficking, there are a lot of people who don't know anything about it. And so we're constantly trying to educate people about human trafficking. And then in the next breath, like, this is important. You should be concerned about it. And then into the next breath, we're like, so get involved, donate, do something about it. And like, so weird how those skills of being able to educate people about a law like that, and then convince them that they should, do what you're telling them to do. I'm like, gosh, it's really kind of weird. You never would have expected it, how such skills would translate. But here I am, many years later. Yeah.
Well, you're building a case for why human trafficking is the #1 issue, basically.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the mindset I try and get into when we do the community presentations, we present to a church or first responders or something like that, is that I have to have an impact. This has to be persuasive and convincing to my audience, because they're not going to think about human trafficking when they leave, most likely.
Right.
And that's a terrible thing, because this is the most important thing. And I think that's probably just how you ended up where you're at, is
right.
When you have this like cognitive understanding, like human trafficking, okay, that has to be the most important thing that we have to stop right now. Yeah. And so when you hear it brought up over and over, you're like, okay, that's what I need to do.
Mm-hmm. It's so much about like planting seeds, right?
Yeah.
Community presentations, I tell you what, those people might not think about it right when they leave, but I bet within a short amount of time, the stuff that you shared with them, it'll come up sooner than they expect.
Right. They might come in skeptical to one of our presentations, say, oh, this doesn't happen. But then on the news a few days later, they see like Epstein and all that.
Gosh, yeah. Yeah.
That going on. Well, if they're doing it, well, maybe it's happening here. And, it gets the wheels turned slowly but surely. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I'm from Atlanta, where human trafficking is huge. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. I don't even think I knew what the term meant. Like, I had no idea. And I come here for the military. My coworker gets me involved with the Red Corps. Is like, you should come out to a meeting. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what has been going on where I grew up, where I live. And now I'm, halfway across the country, and it happens here too. It happens everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
It's crazy.
You have going across the country to learn about it.
Right, exactly, yeah.
That's cool.
But I think that helped my understanding is that this happens worldwide.
Yeah.
So if you think, okay, well, I'm not in Oklahoma City, I'm in Lawton.
Right.
No, it happens in small towns for sure.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we've helped people from like rural Oklahoma, because there's like no services out there. And like, how easy is it to hide something like that out in the middle of nowhere?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a strange thought because I always like watching scary movies, and the movies that are scariest to me are the ones that are out in the middle of nowhere.
There's no one to help.
Right.
Right.
Because if I'm watching one that's in a city, I'm like, well, I'll probably just, go right next door. But there's
Yeah.
But when you do think about trafficking in the big cities, that's when you get into where it's, it's all about the psychological leverage that traffickers use and how they use fear and embarrassment, shame to manipulate you. And it's really just spooky stuff.
Right. It is, because a question we get a lot is like, why don't people just leave? Because that level of control and manipulation, I think if you haven't experienced it or really studied it, you're like, it's so hard to relate to. But then when you start learning about, like, they're very strategic, and that information can get passed around amongst those individuals. The best practices for people who are trafficking others, you realize it's so real. So a common misconception we're constantly dispelling is just because someone isn't physically like tied up or in handcuffs or chains, that doesn't mean that they're not victims of human trafficking, because the bondage is so psychological.
Yes. And that's a common response we get a lot, is that, these girls or these survivors, they were prostituting themselves. They knew what they were doing. They knew what they were getting into.
Right. Yep. We hear that too.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
I was recently reading about Iceberg Slim. He was a big time pimp back in the 1940s, and then in the 60s, after I don't want to say turning over a new leaf, but he published a lot of stuff about his life, a lot of autobiographies and videos and stuff like that. And he goes into extreme detail about how he learned to be an effective pimp and how it was learned over time. So when we talk about, these survivors are victims, they are, because the techniques that the pimps are using they've been strategically improved and tested time after time after time. And these strategies that I was reading about, I mean, it's a great book. I can send it to you if you want. I can send it to anybody listening. But these strategies it's mind-blowing, manipulative stuff that you would never in your wildest dreams come up with.
Right.
And that was what he was doing back in the 40s. Right. What they have now with technology online, it's incredible, and it's incredibly unfair to call somebody that's a victim of trafficking a prostitute.
Absolutely. Yep. You're right.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to add, because you're just right. Yeah.
So I wanted to get your perspective on this, though. What we see a lot is we see people who are on fire about this issue, and they get all worked up. But commonly what happens, and I think it's just the way people work, is that after getting all fired up and everything, they don't know what to do about trafficking. And eventually it just it fizzles out, and it slips your mind. It's not something you worry about. So if somebody's watching this, or they see your website, see your newsletter, any of that sort of stuff, and they're all fired up about human trafficking, what would you tell them to do, like, right now?
Okay, well, I can say that if you're fired up about this and don't know how to contribute, first of all, like, it's good to think about the fact that you probably have something more to learn. So seek out good knowledge, good information, because some of the stuff that you might find out there is just promoting like different misconceptions about human trafficking. So really do your homework. So learn about that. And then I can say this, like any nonprofit, I can say the same for the Red Cord, for the Dragonfly Home. In order to do our work, we need funding. And I know at Dragonfly, we have a robust fundraising program with federal grants and local grants and local foundation grants, and then individual donors and corporate sponsorships and social. I mean, like we have a whole program, right? But like it's still like a constant, I don't want to say struggle. We've been so blessed with provision, but like there's so many people who need help just right now. And so you guys, in order to do what you're going to do, you have to have funding as well. So I would say everybody can raise funds. If you want to do like a bake sale at your church, do a bake sale at your church. If you think that donating $125 from a bake sale isn't going to make a difference, I mean, we have to keep our lights on. We have to pay electricity. We have to pay for the AC and the oppressive summer heat that we are experiencing right now, because we have to have a place for people to go. That's huge. Also, like there's so many technology has been used for bad stuff with trafficking. So let's turn it around and use it for good. Do a Facebook fundraiser for an organization. I just did a Facebook fundraiser for my birthday, and in 1 week raised like $450 for Dragonfly, just posting about it. So I would say I understand the feeling of being overwhelmed by that. I came from that as well. And I had to sort of like, this was in 2013. So 6 years ago, there wasn't as much out there as there is today. And just kind of like started figuring it out. So that fundraising is something that you can do right now, do it tomorrow and make a difference. And then I think also find that local organization you want to support and just ask. You might think, well, I don't know how to do anything. I don't have any useful skills. But if you just start talking to someone at the organization, there's a good chance that there's something you can do to help.
Yes, I agree with that completely. Ask exactly, is there anything you need? Is there anything I can do? And, tell us what you're good at.
That's right. Yeah.
One of the things we desperately need at the Red Cord is people to get involved in the schools and get us into the schools, because the administrators and the people in charge are not listening, and they don't want to have this issue brought up. So if you can raise hell about it to the schools and the teachers, that's what we need. And that's something a lot of people can do, but they probably would never think of without.
Right. Yeah. That's good. So then, Brandon, what should people do if somebody wants to start a letter writing campaign, or they want information about the Red Cord so that they can present that information to the administrators? What should they do? Who should they contact about that?
They should just contact us. You can contact us on Facebook. You can go to theredcord.org and you can send us an email. You can fill out a contact form. Honestly, we get a lot of Facebook messages about what can I do? That's perfectly acceptable.
Right.
And you can always come to our meetings on the second Sunday of each month at 6 p.m. at the Hilton Garden Inn. Those are especially great because the whole board is always there, and we're in that brainstorming mode. Tell us your ideas. We're open to new things.
But you could help people if they wanted to write an email or a letter. You could help them with wording, why, about Red Cord and about why human trafficking is important. Okay, good. So all you people listening, you should do that right away.
And anything you can think of is fundraising, and just be about it. That's another big thing is, for us, we just want to spread awareness about the problem. Because think about how many things you hear about every day on the news, and then consider how many times you hear about human trafficking.
That's right.
If it weren't for you guys, and if it weren't for some of the stuff that we do, many people in Oklahoma would never even hear about human trafficking at all.
Or maybe hear about it from something that happens in just New York City or just overseas.
You hear about this billionaire, the Patriots owner, Robert Kraft. You hear about that stuff. And that stuff tricks you into thinking that, it's only the top. It's the most elite people are involved in this. It's pervasive throughout our society.
That's right. Yep. You're
and
right.
That's why it's such a big issue.
Yeah, agree.
So besides the shelter and getting funding for that, what other big things do you guys have coming up?
Well, let's see. I would say the next big thing we have coming up is our 4th annual Crown of Beauty Gala. That is our biggest fundraising event of the year, and that will be here in Oklahoma City on Thursday, October 3rd, from 6 to 9 p.m. at this really cool building that's just off I-40, called the Oklahoma City Historic Farmers Public Market. It's an awesome venue. It's where we had it last year. It's so beautiful. And our tickets for that, so you can save the date for that now if you want to attend. And tickets should go on sale here, I think probably toward the end of July, early August. But yeah, right now we're in the process of, we have a lot of it planned, but getting like sponsors, getting items donated for our awesome silent auction, and just getting volunteers for that as well. But we've done it 3 times so far, and it's been super fun every time. So I expect the 4th one to be even better.
Yeah, awesome. I'll be there for that.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think that about does it for me. Do you have anything that you're like, man, I really want to say?
I just want to say thank you for inviting us on your podcast. I think it's awesome you're doing that, and it's an honor to talk to you.